Hi, it's Nicky, and thank you so much for stopping by, because it's really hard to find a podcast to listen to these days, isn't it? Not. I think you'll like this though. It's called Be Someone, Not Everyone, and you're going to meet some really, really fascinating people. I'm not looking for super famous people, so don't think that Cher's going to come and sit next door to me. Well, she might, who knows? But what I were looking for is people that have had a life, had a bit of adversity, and come out all the better for it. So get yourself a pot of tea, sit yourself down, and I hope you enjoy it. See you in a bit. Can't tell you how many times I've clicked flipping record and not actually, I haven't clicked record halfway through. Hiya everybody. I think by now you may have picked up, I hope, that I know some very interesting people. And I have to say, this is the first time me and this lady's met. We've only spoken for a couple of minutes, but I am already captivated by her. And this is quite a story. And I've said it a couple of times. I absolutely mean it. You will never meet a bigger, better person if you live to be 910 than this particular lady. So can we all say a massive hiya to Cher Graiden? Hiya, Cher.
Hello. Hiya.
Oh, it's like an echo. Right. Well, Cher is an author, and we're going to find out what drove the books. And let's start at where you are now. You're an end of life nurse. Is that right?
I'm a community nursing sister. So yes, so like the biggest part of our job, if you like, one of the biggest parts is people come home to die. If you want to come home to die, not that anybody wants to, it's a preferred place. So yeah, it's a really big part of my job. Been a nurse for 23 years, worked in loads of different places, been lucky enough to work in loads of different places, met loads of people, part of loads of people's lives. Never a dull moment.
No, absolutely. And you will have had some very exceptional experiences, I'm sure. So the question that I always ask people that do what you do, and I've met one or two people, because I find nurses that are there at the end of people's lives fascinating, because everybody wants to know, is it true that people come to meet us? And if it is, what experiences have you had in that regard?
Yeah, it's true. It is true. It's not that a nurse sees anybody come to meet you, but it's a common thing among nurses where people say, "There's me mum, there's me dad, or my brother's here." So and when you first start to be a nurse, I remember being a student nurse, and I was told to go in a room to look after a lady, and I was with a really, really good experienced nurse, and she said she hasn't got long to live, and I was absolutely mortified then. I was only young, and she said, just go in and sit with her. No idea what to do. And this lady was talking and chatting away, and I said, aren't you scared? Like, it was probably naivety, really. Aren't you scared to die? And she went, no, my mum's here, honey. And she was like, and I was like, oh God, and looked down the room for like where these people were and couldn't see anything in it. And at the time, I thought, it's such a cliche, isn't it? You hear about it, and you think it can't be true. But that lady wasn't scared to die. She died really peacefully. And after she died, and you carry on and do a process, you make people as comfortable and settled as they can, because it's a scary process for anyone, isn't it? It's scary for family, it can be scary for patients. So, and then the nurse came in, and I always remember she came in and opened the window, and I said, "What are you opening the window for?" And she said, "Just let her soul out." And I said, "Oh, now here we go." And then the amount of nurses I've sort of seen that done. I don't know whether it's a ritualistic thing. I don't know whether it's just something you do. It's our job. But then you get to a point where you can't not do that because it's wrong.
Yeah. Do you know what? When my father died, I was my father when he died, and I actually felt like it was like a wind blowing on my hand. And he took his last breath and his soul went to the window. I actually saw it, felt it, it brushed past me, you know. But you can't have the same perception of life when you live with that. What's your perception of all that? How has it altered the way that you live?
To alter the way you live, doesn't it? Because some people might experience death once or twice in their life. It might not be until later on in their life, and when it's on a like an almost daily basis, you've got to, it has to become part of your life, doesn't it? And you look at life differently, don't you? You know, you have an agency about life. I think nurses have an agency about life. People take for granted you're all getting 3 score year and 10, and you're not, are you? No.
Yeah.
And you learn to love these people all your life, and then they're going to go, and it's like the worst thing. You have to become somebody else, don't you? And inevitably, we're all going there. It's when and how, isn't it? And the only, if you like, control nurses have, it's the how, isn't it? You know, you'll be comfortable, you'll be at home, you'll be settled, you'll have your loved ones around you, and that's it, isn't it?
So how has it made you live your life different? Because we're going to talk about your extraordinary life in a second, but how has it made you live your life differently, and what advice would you give to anybody?
I think it just makes you want to be cared for, doesn't it? You have to care for other people. That life's not a given, is it? You give what you get. I absolutely believe you give what you get, and if you want to be cared for, you've got to care for people, don't you? And I absolutely believe do any hardship, it'll come straight back to you. You know, you do have that kind of thing about you. You're not the most important person in your life when you're a nurse, and I think living a life where you are the most important person is a really lonely life. You know, I am so blessed. I have so many people in my life, so many people with dramas going on and life going on, and it's a richer life, isn't it? I don't mean money. I'm not a millionaire. I mean just generally rich in life. You know, it's
a great way of looking at it, and quite amazing with what happened. What was can you just tell everybody, if you could, the pivotal moment? What happened to you that perhaps put you on a different path at 8?
It's, well, without going into detail, we abused as children, you know, so it was, but you're talking about today I'm 50-year-old, you know, 40 years ago, childhood was very different, you know, it was in some ways part of life, and it makes you what you are, doesn't it? And you either fall by it or you live by it, don't you? And so it was something that happened. It was my life. It was my choice. But I'm here and I'm well, and I have lovely kids, and I have a lovely family, and I have a lovely job. So if it's made me a better person, or it's made me know more information so I could stop that happening to somebody else, or that I can know how it feels when it happens to somebody else, then I'm a richer person for it. Not that it is a positive thing, but it's what you take it. Everybody has things that happen to them in life, don't they? I've seen people's lives destroyed because their mum and dad get divorced. I've seen people's lives destroyed because they've had an accident. Everybody has something, doesn't it? It's what you do with the something, isn't it?
What did you do with what happened to you?
I think it just made me who I am. Not that I'm a perfect person, because I'm not by any means, but it just made me want to be more of a caring person. You know, you'd rather be. I remember at the time thinking, people talk about people who abuse kids and it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible, and it ruins their life. But you'd rather be the abused than the abuser, wouldn't you? Because I can't think of a bigger thing in life. You know, you're only on this planet once, aren't you? If you know, so, and to be that kind of tortured person, to do that kind of thing is worse. Mine is me past. It has to be me past, doesn't it? And you just you've got to take some elements from it and move on with your life, don't you?
And how long did it take you, because I know that you were only a young child, how long did it take you to come to that conclusion? Or when it were happening to you, you know, did you have a slightly different perception of it all? Were you bewildered? Were you frightened? Were you angry? Did you...
To be honest, I can't remember loads of it. I do remember thinking, feeling sorry for him. You know, it's awful, and it's, as a child, you don't really know what's going on, do you? You don't really know. My experience isn't true to what's in the book. I just use the feelings that go with it. That was in the book. It wasn't exactly true to that thing. So, but I just felt like that's how you are. It's got to empower you. Things have to empower you in life, don't they? If they don't empower you, they pull you down.
Yeah.
And it's which one you pick when it's really hard. And like everybody else in the world, you have bad days, you have good days, and you can blame what you like. But you'll still have bad days, you still have good days, and at the end of the day, you still have to get on, don't you?
I just think it's amazing that you have come to that conclusion, because it's clearly compassion, as we're going to hear, is clearly, you know, it has driven your life, and love has driven your life. Tell us about your children.
Oh, well, I have two birth children. I have two daughters, and then in sort of a little bit like the book, but not exactly true to the book. So it was just not based on, but it was. And then we adopted three children, two girls. So we ended up with four girls and a boy. And then we have a little girl. She's got cerebral palsy and she's autistic. She had a really bad childhood. We've sort of had her off and on all of her life for a couple of days, but she lives with us full time now. She's lovely. She's so lovely. My sister left her children years ago. She ran away. She has them back now, but she ran away for quite a while. So we sort of ended up a really big family really quickly. Really lucky to be a really big family really quickly. Moved into an abandoned doctor's like house that had been empty for about 20 years, I think, and we sort of moved in, and everybody had a black bag, everybody had a bed, so but we have a lovely home. We've made it our home. We all did it, and then we have a big massive kitchen table, and we have so if you make dinner, everybody just comes. It's a bit like a soup kitchen, really, whoever comes in, and you don't only have your own kids here, because you have their friends, their boyfriends, their friends' friends who'll still come round, and funny enough, they all, they all refer to me as Cher, and it's nice. You couldn't really ask for more, could you? And it's not all my doing. So it's other people's lives, isn't it? It's everybody's life. When you go around that kitchen table or you come in, everybody's lives around that table, aren't they? Mm. Someone's leaving the boyfriend, someone's having a bad day, someone needs money, it's all of that. That's the life bit. It's not the bigger bit that everyone thinks you're aiming for. It's the little bits that count, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's the details that count, isn't it?
It is. And on that, I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people who have adopted, and I'm just interested because they say that the second they saw those children, they knew that they belonged to them. Did you have that experience? What was it that said to you, you're going to be my son, you're going to be my daughter, I'm going to look after you for the rest of your life? What was it? What was that feeling that made you go, do you know what, I can't wait to have you at that kitchen table?
Mine didn't come to me gradually, because we fostered them at first, so they came to me sort of gradually, but I never for any of them for 1 minute think that my kids, they're just kids. I defy any woman, really, if kids come to your door and they need looking after, to say, no, I'm not. You just would, wouldn't you? You know what? You can clothe a child from Primark for a tenner. They don't have to go to school scruffy, do they? They just want you to be bothered about what they're doing at school and when they're doing it. And they just want, I think, someone to be bothered about them, don't they? Genuinely bothered about them. Do you know what? Your life's rubbish, honey. Come here. Oh, wait, let's talk about it. Yes, everybody's life's rubbish. You're not the only one. You have to just move on. You move on. And they were lovely. They all just had such personalities. They were all so, like, all of my kids. My kids as friends as well, like over the years. I can't even tell you how many kids we've had in our life over the years. But they just, I don't know. I just feel like I am so rich. They have so many personalities. They're so different. They are. So it's not that I feel like they belong to me. They just bring so much to the table. They are them, aren't they? And I'm just a lucky part of their life, Anna. And don't get me wrong, we've had our moments. I was full of teenagers. We've done the runabout chasing them, and we've done all of the stuff that you do with teenagers, and the moods and the strops and the fights and the, illness, wellness, marriage is hard like everybody else's is. Marriage isn't a Facebook thing where everyone's happy and all wearing matching pajamas. Life is, life, we've done it all of it. But all of that then, I think, makes you into something better, doesn't it? You still, again, to take something better from it, don't you? I still do that to my kids now when they're nearly grown up. Well, they are grown up. I've got grandchildren now. So I have 4 now. Just had a new one. So, and they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. And again, the personalities. People say like they look like you, Jenny, and you think, well, probably don't. they just pick your traits up, don't they? And when you try and explain to people and they say, how many kids have you got? Like you say like 5, 6, and they go, oh, and you're like, it's not. To be honest, if I had a bigger table and a bigger house, I'd have the rest.
Wow. How many children have you fostered altogether?
We have 6. I have 6 children, 4 grandchildren, and we fostered another 2 children who like just as foster, but we adopted the others. So they're mine. They're mine and my husband's. They're lovely. They are absolutely lovely.
I mean, that's great. Just the fact that you say they're mine. You know, I'm interested, I'm interested. There's a lot of kids that go off the rails, isn't there? And when you look at the background, you can kind of see why they did what they did. You know, in those formative years, terrible things happen to kids.
They're angry, aren't they? A lot of kids are angry, and they're looking for something, aren't they? They're looking because they want what everybody else wants in the world, don't they? Everybody wants to be loved, don't they?
Mm.
Everybody wants to be that somebody's someone, don't they? And they and some, it's awful for some of them. They get passed about and passed about and passed about, and you don't belong. It's like, I always think, imagine like sleeping in a stranger's house and not daring to go to the loo, or you know, it's all of that, isn't it? That shouldn't be part of your life when you're a kid. You shouldn't have any worries when you're a kid, should you? You
No.
should play out, and you should think about your tea, and you should watch the telly, and you should read, and you should. But then they get adult worries, don't they, from a very early age. So you grow up from a very early age, and then you don't get that time that you should have as a child. And then they're angry, and with good right, with good reason. It's natural.
Because when you see these, God, all the terrible stabbings and, oh my God, it's on every time you put TV on now. What, if you ruled the world, Cher, if you ruled the world, what would you do to intercept all the trauma that is created by these kids going off the rails? What would you do?
I think even when kids, you see them in gangs and you see them and they're angry, they tend, I always think, they must feel like they don't belong anywhere. So they belong wherever they belong. So if that's in a knife gang, that's where they belong, isn't it? As bad as it is, even with the worst elements it has, they belong there. They feel like they belong there. They feel like they have a role there. They feel like they've got some control there, don't they? So, but you see people who've been through horrendous things and they come out really well, don't they? And they do good from it. And maybe as if you could show them that a bit, that people can come out of it. It's not a sentence for life. It's life. Just it's the way it is. But some of them can't see that bit, can you? So how do you show them? How do you show them that bit? Apart from making you realise that when you're a kid, you should be valued. You should be nurtured and you should be cared for. And it's ideal, isn't it? Not every kid in the world is going to be cared for, nurtured. It is the way of the world. But it isn't the end of the world. You grow up and you grow out of it. And then it's your own choices. And everything after that is your own choice, isn't it?
Do you know, I wish you could speak to every kid on the planet that had got a bit lost and had a difficult time, because what you say, it just makes so much sense. How many children have you fostered altogether?
So it would be six, 7. So not loads. I mean, you see people fostered like 50 children, don't you? And they have people coming in, and they're amazing. They have people coming in and out of their house all the time, don't they? Just pass through. Probably if I didn't work, I work full time, but if I didn't work, it probably would. It has to be something that works for all of your family, though, and it's not easy. Looking after kids isn't easy, is it? It's from getting up on a morning. For our little girl, we have special needs. From getting up on a morning, you're seeing to her from to the minute, and then you're going to bed, and then you're listening for it on the monitor, and it's not an easy thing. It just has to be, I think, your thing. It's not for everybody, is it? And I think the other thing is that we're all driven in life, haven't we? That you'll grow up, that you'll get married, that you'll have 2 kids, and people aren't. And we put these ideals out, don't we, and torture people with it. There you are. There's perfection. You measure yourself against that, and we'll all fall by it, won't we? All of us.
Yeah, I think we all grew up with, like, my mother with a woman's own, that you would meet somebody in your early 20s and you'd get married and it'd be really lovely, and you'd bake him a cake every weekend and he'd tell you you were nice all the time and he'd never have affairs, and oh, my life, what has society done telling us that ideal? I'm not even sure it's possible. But maybe part of why we all get so up is that we think that is who we should be and that is how life is. And I don't think that we're set up to deal with trauma or...
We're set up to fail, aren't we?
Sorry?
Yeah. We're set up to fail, aren't we?
Yeah.
And you're right, and I can't cook to save my life. I burn everything. I'm notorious. The children dread when I cook, and so I would never have fitted in the woman's zone. I would never fit in your natural childhood. I would never probably fit it anywhere, but it just makes you what you are. And it's your choices, isn't it? And the minute you get your own choices, you make your own, and then you've got to go with that, don't you? I think you've got to, it's when do you get to that point where you empower someone and say, I know that's awful, that is dreadful, and that will never go away, and that's your past, but there'll be other things that will happen in your life, and they'll never go away either. But you get on, you only get one life, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I would argue that we have only one life. I think we have several lives, but I think
one that you know at the moment. Yeah.
On this life, you're right. So? Can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
What's your relationship with your husband? I mean, is he, because obviously you've only got finite time. Does he, is he on the same page as you, or tell us about your husband and your relationship?
I think like everybody else, it's like a real relationship. Sometimes we get on, sometimes we don't get on. Lockdown's harder than anything else because we're probably glad to work, because if you had to sit and look at each other all day, you'd be strangling each other, wouldn't you? He's a nice man, he's patient. We've grew up together, and you change as you grow up, don't you? Ask me, did we fight 10, 15 years ago? Yes, absolutely. Did we want different ideals 10, 15 years? Yeah, absolutely. But as you go older, and the more you see, the more you learn to love people for different reasons, don't you? I probably appreciate now that if I come home, he's bought me a bar of chocolate. Years ago, I probably would have wanted a big bunch of flowers, and you change, don't you? You change your ideal. You learn. I think we've probably learned to respect for each other, which I think we're really, really lucky to have done. But it's going through that, isn't it? But like everybody else, it's one of them things. Do you go through it? Do you stop? Do you cut your losses? Do you get out of it? Neither of us have saints. It's just life. But yeah, he's lovely. He's a nice man.
Do you think most people give up too soon?
No.
I mean, I think, what is it? 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5 divorces now?
I think sometimes it just depends on, because it depends what you call too soon. What if you're only going to live till you're 30 and you're living in an unhappy marriage? I think you just have, I think finding someone, you've got to have respect for yourself, because I think a lot of times we try to find ourselves in somebody else. I think this is where we go wrong. Somebody else can make you feel well. Someone can make you feel bad, but somebody else cannot make you into your ultimate. You've got to do it yourself. That has to be an inside thing. And we search for it in someone else. We search for it, for a bloke to say we're pretty, or a bloke to say and we're not.
But we're taught to do that. We're taught from being very young.
Of course, you want the feedback, don't you? Of course you do. You do, and you learn, and yourself. The more things that happen to you in life, the more you start to, people can break your heart once, they can't break it again and again, because you become a different person, don't you? Once you've been through something, you become a different person, don't you? You harden, if you like, if that's the word for it, or you get wiser, however you look at it, and you become.
Or it just sinks all the way to the bottom one day, and that's the end, and there's no return.
You've got to stop torturing yourself, don't you? Because if we lived on it like ifs and buts, pots and pans would all be tinkers, wouldn't we? You can't. It's what's right for you, isn't it? And you'll never know, will you? I will never know if I've done things right in my life. You probably will never know if you've done things right in your life. You just do your best. I think if you do your best, no one can ask you anything else.
Yeah, I think the thing is that you do the best you can with what you've got, and when you know more, you can be more. That's the thing. Crikey, we've all made mistakes, but life is so complicated. When I think of, it's almost like when you think of what it must have been like, the darling buds of May, what a simple life people would have had in those days.
It was a hard life, wasn't it? People worked, and it's the daftest things now, isn't it? I'm 50 now. I don't drink, but I love going to coffee shops, which I can't, obviously, lockdown. But you go to coffee shops. No women went to coffee shops 20 years ago, did they?
No.
You never went out for a walk and talk to your friends. If you wallpapered your house, you varnished it because it was staying on for 25 years. We had a different perception of life. We had different luxuries. And I think years ago, it's always the past, isn't it? It's always, you look at it a bit better, a little bit more nostalgic, but it was probably just as equally as hard.
Yeah.
People didn't live to ripe old ages, did they?
No, they didn't, but we maybe had more sense of community.
You probably had that bit more support because you had to, but you probably didn't have to have your husband, did you? It was a man and woman world, wasn't it? So you had your friends, didn't you? You had the other wife who didn't go anywhere or didn't do anything either, and that was probably your network. again, you just want to belong, don't you? You want to belong, you want to be loved, whether that's from your husband, whether that's from your friends. It's just natural, isn't it?
Well, we're pack animals. I say all the time, that's what we are. We're pack animals. We're part of a pack. And we're always subconsciously trying to create that pack.
It's how we work best, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. So tell us, we'll start with, no, I'll tell you what, we'll start with this book first.
Harry Hot.
Tell us. I have to say, I have read it today, and I'll be giving it to my son, age 30, when he comes, when he's allowed to come home again. Tell us about your writing. What was it that made you sit down and get a pen out?
Well, when I was at school, I probably wasn't the brightest kid, but probably wasn't sick either. But we were scruffy, and school wasn't like it is now. It wasn't. And I remember going because we had a list of what you could be. Your work experience. You used to go and the interview, and I said I want to be either a writer or a solicitor, and she said no, you can only be something off list B. And as a child, I thought, oh well, So on list B, you could work in a shop, and I said, I don't want to work in a shop. She said, well, you might be able to be a nurse. And I said, all right. So that was it. It was like that sort of cemented. That's how much influence people have you when you're a child, don't they? So, and I've always wrote. I used to write other people's work for them, and stuff. So I've always wrote. I was never brilliant when I did my nursing. I wouldn't say I was any Shakespeare doing me academic work, but stories. I liked stories. And then when we had a lot of children, we moved house. So we ended up with, at the time, 5 girls and a boy. But our boy was only little. So I used to read to the girls, and my husband used to read to the boy. But we and he doesn't like reading, and he's such a flat reader. It's just the words. I used to think, oh my God, I'd be asleep. But so he made the story up about Harry Hot Dog, and our little boy had come from a really bad background, and it was a drug addicted family, and he didn't have the normality of, he'd lived like that he was only really little. He didn't know any other. So moving into our family, as unnormal as we were, was a bit more of your average life, and it was really difficult. So he'd never really had his own bed or anything, or he'd always slept in a bed with his sisters. So everything was a big deal. Going to the dentist was a big deal. Buying his shoes was a big deal. Everything was a big deal. And he really took to this Harry Hot Dog character. So we decided that when we were going to do something else, like he was going to the dentist, my husband would make up a story and say, well, Harry Hot Dog went to the dentist. And like all little boys, he was football mad, and he was far too small for his age, not really welcome at football matches because, it was just his background, wasn't it? So Harry Hot Dog became our mad thing for change for him, really. It was a bit like Harry Hot Dog's done it first, and then you'll do it. Like, next, this is what we do. And he actually used to ask for Harry Hot Dog for a story all the time. So I've written it. It was for my son for Christmas, my husband, so I've written it. And it was years ago. I mean, my son's 24 now, so we just written it.
And how old was he when you wrote the book?
He was 5.
Oh.
So, because I thought it might be better if we have pictures to our book. So originally I just drew it. We drew it on a sketchbook, so it sort of evolved from there. And with no thought or dream of being a writer or making it into a book. But then obviously times change, and then you could make books into books. You couldn't at the time. So that went from there. So that was there.
So who would this book help?
Well, when you read the book, it's about a little boy he wants to play football, but he sort of gets picked on a bit because of where he comes from, because his dad has a hot dog stand, and sort of in relation to the same as my little boy did. But it doesn't stop your dreams, does it? It doesn't matter. If other people see you as that, it doesn't compound what you are. You can still go and be what you want. It's not about other people's perceptions, is it? It's about you've got
who you think, yeah.
Yeah, who you think you are, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was sort of the idea. And since that my son's read, I mean, he's 20 odd, so all the little boys who've come through have read it, so it's become like my grandson now thinks that story's about him, so it's sort of just stuck with the family, really. I appreciate it's no work of Shakespeare, I appreciate that, but it's, it just sort of became our family book. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed writing. I really enjoyed writing. I enjoyed doing the drawings. I mean, they're not amazing either. I'm not, Walt Disney won't be hiring me tomorrow, but
they might.
No, but yeah, it was nice. It was a good thing to do, and I enjoyed it.
But do you know what? And I'm sure you agree, if one person gets that book for a bullied or excluded or child that feels different, then it were worth writing. Because if that raises the self-esteem and confidence of one child, that's job done, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Tell us about Eldon the Owl. What's all this one about?
So when my grandbabies were born, they were born at 22 weeks. They were right, really. They were only £1.3 and £1.6. They were so early. I mean, a little bit earlier, and we wouldn't have had them. So they were in intensive care for a long time, as part of a year. And the youngest one, she's called Lola. She has cerebral palsy. She has learning difficulties, and they're twins, and they've sort of grew. The gap in them has grown as they've developed. Lola hasn't, Ellie has. So it's been, and we were trying to do reading stories. We were talking about reading books, and even when you read to Lola, nothing went in. You could read to her, and she'd love to sit with you to read, but she had no idea what you were reading about. If you read about a witch, you could ask her about an astronaut, and she wouldn't know which one you'd read. So I was in bed one night and just came into my head that I was going to write. I knew where I was going to put on every single page, funny enough. So I wrote it, and we made pictures. And because I'd done it for Harry Hot Dog, I made her a book. It's just a photo album book, really it was. But she loved it. And she used to come and bring it back and read it all the time. And she can't read, but she knows what's on every page, just from repetition. She knows what's on every page. But she actually sort of related to it. And it was funny because you look at her, and I love her. I've always read, and I love reading, but it's the interaction, isn't it, with reading? You sit there, you spend time with them. It's you and them and that story, and that's the point, isn't it? Not always what you read, it's you and them and that story. And for Lola, she was in that book, and she had a hot water bottle, and it was called Eldon the Owl. So it became a little like part of her life, quite part of her life. I've written them for all of them, actually, the kids, the little ones, but so.
What advice would you give? Because you're clearly an expert at looking after children with special needs.
No such thing. There's no such thing.
Really?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people that were going through the same?
I'd say give yourself a break. Don't put pressure on yourself, because no two kids are the same. And when you have bad days, you have bad days. No, it's not a failure because you have a bad day, so. And if the kids are happy and they're all right, you don't measure against anybody else. Now, our oldest daughter, she's 19 now, but she's probably mentally about 5 or 6. And she comes in on a night, and she comes in from school, and she gets her jams on. She's autistic, so she sits in the same seat on the end of the couch with her hot water bottle, with her blanket on, and with her cup of tea at the side of her. And you think, it doesn't matter where she teacher in the world, that's like her happiest bit. She's safe, she's loved, she's warm, the fire's on. That's her time to get a cuddle. And so might never teach her anything in her life, never do a thing, but she's cared for, isn't she?
Yeah.
She doesn't go to bed. She doesn't worry about, because she is profound. She wears nappies. She can't get a drink herself. She can't do anything herself unless you do it for her. And that you cannot, in a million years, imagine being in that position, can you?
No.
Need someone to take you to the toilet, needing someone to give you a drink. And what if that's someone that you're with doesn't want to give you a drink and doesn't want to take you to the toilet? So you think, when you see her and she's settled and she's happy and she's smiling and she sings a lot, you've done it, haven't you? You've done it. And all them nights where she hasn't slept for nights on end and your eyes are down there and you look terrible, you think, then they're gone, aren't they? So it's not easy.
But what an amazing thing to do in your life. What an amazing thing to be able to create in your life, making that girl happy and watching that. I mean, joy to see her we all saw her there, sat on edge of the sofa with a cup of tea and what an incredible thing for you to be able to create. But, how do you keep going when you're so exhausted and you've not slept? And
everybody does, don't they? We all keep going. You could have people who are getting up and walking to work, and people who are getting up and working and never earning enough money to make life no less or more exhausted than myself. And I'm sure there's a lot more exhausted than me. And, there's kids with a lot more challenges than my children have. So, I'm no measure.
Well, people don't keep going, and I think that we've seen all this week with lockdown, haven't we? How vulnerable mothers are, and how people who really have you know, they can eat, they've got the warm, they've got their houses, and people are literally cracking up. You know, I think that all this lockdown stuff and what is happening in the world has made us realise that maybe we weren't quite so strong as we thought we were. A lot of
Because
people have
we didn't
cracked.
realise that the social side was a bigger part as it was. Because if you'd have asked me before lockdown, what do I do? I'd say, not a lot. I go to work, I come home, I
Mm,
clean like everybody else does, I tidy, and when I get a chance, I write. And that's about the level of me. I swim. That's about the level of excitement in my life, you know. So, but even I think for myself, I didn't appreciate the little things. I didn't appreciate going to the cafe. I didn't appreciate going out for a meal, you know, and that bit we all just took for granted, and all of a sudden we've realized what it was. And I think that maybe it's just that recognition, and right now people have not got no end in sight, have they?
mm.
And that compounds things. It's freezing cold, it's dark when you wake up, it's dark when you get back in, you can't sit in the garden, you know, there's no outside space, and there's no social interaction, you know. It's hard even at work on the wards and things, trying to keep morale up and things. It's quite hard.
Yeah. Which
You-
is what we kind of started there. It is the social thing. We're pack animals.
That's it.
And you're right, we didn't appreciate the freedoms that we have. And it was the little things. I were talking on my Facebook group a couple of weeks ago. I've always liked me fancy schmancy stuff to go to work. I admit I've been an handbag, boots and clothes person. Will I ever go back to that? Will we ever go back to feeling defined? It wasn't quite like that for me, but feeling defined by brands and fancy schmancy, where actually the real happiness is just freaking being together, Cher. Just being together.
And it is, and it's that bit, isn't it? I think because you need all these elements of life, and right now we're missing a massive element, aren't we? We're
Mm,
missing this massive chunk. Wherever your social life, your social bit is, we're missing it, and the social bit that we have at home is compounded, isn't it? So if you
mm,
live with a miserable husband or a miserable wife, you're stuck in there, haven't you? Everything's like
mm.
that's all compounded, isn't it? Even nurses, like I work on the ward sometimes, and wherever we work, we've got masks, we've got visors on, and you can't see anyone. Everyone's wearing scrubs, so you don't know what anybody's wearing. There's no identification of, and whereas you would have said, "Oh God, now let's have a cup of tea." We've got to say, or you've seen something, particularly awful, and you say, "Right, let's go a cup of tea, put the kettle on like the magic kettle." This is what we do, and that sort of element's gone, isn't it? 2 meters apart.
Yeah. And people are becoming very frightened, you know. Terrified. I walked through Home Firth a couple of weeks ago telling Annabelle, who was a mutual friend of ours, and there were a bloke walking towards me, and he were meters away from me, and I didn't have a mask on. I were outside, I put it on to go to shops, and this man literally freaked out. I'm going, it's all right, I'm going to walk on road, but this man, you could see he'd literally lost it and were going to pieces. How, when we come out of all this, we will, I hope, see the real joys of life. That your real joy of life is having those friendships and those people to belong to. Maybe we'll even see as family in a different way because we just didn't appreciate it. Who
Isn't,
knows?
isn't that what does people go through big things in life? People have been through bigger than this, and I appreciate it's the biggest disease we've had. But there are still other diseases. People are still dying of cancer. People
Mm,
are still getting knocked over. People are still dying of other things. Life is still going on. This has just become the biggest part of it. And I think for everybody, it's like this fear of dying and death and scared what you're going to catch is compounded
mm.
everything, hasn't it? So, and if everybody's on that same wavelength, that's what we're going to get back, isn't it? And it's really hard to sort of
Yeah.
work with.
It's compounded it, but it's compounded because we're separated.
Yes, you can't.
So, when you lose somebody, you can't get everybody round.
No,
I've been to a couple of funerals and there's been 10 of us stood in a field, and it compounds it. So, again, one of the great things I hope that comes from all this is that we actually appreciate each other.
treat each other better. You know, you do, don't you? I do on a daily basis. I have to try and make myself. Do you know? Don't get me wrong. I think everybody's got natural bitchy tendencies. Everybody, including myself, everybody. But you have to sort of stop yourself and think, "You're just being evil there, Jenny. Behave. You know."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it is that maybe after all this, with all the grief and the realizations of what counts in life, we will judge other people slightly differently. Where we would have jumped on and kicked the shit out of them, we might just feel slightly differently now. Tell me about this book.
Or Green Bottles. This was I written I written this one years and years ago, again with no plan to ever publish it. It was just a storybook. It's not true. It's just based on sort of feelings what that I've put in the story. I was trying to sort of show how life was so different, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's another world. You're talking about another world, aren't you? Another set of values, another set of beliefs. And I was trying in a sort of hopefully an interesting way to talk about what life does to you and what you do. And what I was trying to bring in was I did it with Annabelle, because we were talking about a lot about how much difference your mum's relationships makes. Having a mum, not in all sense of the words, because it could be a dad or it could be an auntie, or but having that somebody, how it makes you make your choices. And what do you do with your choices? Like, you don't have to actually just turn into your mum, good or bad. You don't have to turn into your mum, and people regularly don't. But so it was about that. It was particularly for me, and just a real interest in writing. And I'd started and thinking, then I'd keep going, and not for 1 minute, I have to be honest with you, thinking anyone would ever read them.
I know a lot of people are doing. What were the differences 20, 30 years ago?
Well, you look at kids now, don't you? I always think when you look at kids now, there's a million photos, isn't there? And if someone said, "What did you look like when you were a little baby, Cher?" I don't know. There wasn't the technology, there wasn't the joy around kids. I don't think years ago. You were just brought up, and I think for women years ago, it was a bit of a chore. A lot of it was a chore. There wasn't so much pleasure in it as there is now. No one was saying, go and have 9 months off work and and get time to know your baby. It was just, that's your baby, get on with it. And you didn't have the nice bit. I'm sure people did. I'm sure it wasn't probably all like, awful for everybody, but I think there's just so much more joy in it now. There's more appreciation. You don't want to miss a minute now, do you? When the babies and you see all this stuff, you don't want to miss a minute. They've smiled, they've giggled, I don't think anyone talked like that 30 years ago. You went out and played, didn't you? We were saying the other day, when you let the dog out. No one took the dog for a walk 30 years ago. You opened the door.
Let the dog out.
Yeah. That was a walk, wasn't it? That was the dog's walk. There was the dogs even had friends, didn't they? Used to rang about in groups. Yeah, and when you were kids, we used to go out and we'd go to the beach and come back. Oh, it's dark. We better go home. It's dark. But we'd be like 7 and 8 year olds. It's dark, but you wouldn't dream of that. That would be neglect now, wouldn't it? It wasn't neglect 30 years ago. It was like 30 years ago.
You're absolutely right, and I have this conversation a lot. So I didn't have a great relationship with my mum, God bless her. She's been dead a long time. And, that not having a great relationship with somebody that then isn't here anymore, and you can never fix it, kind of created its own problems. But I'm a child of the 50s. I'm a little bit, actually, no, I'm a lot older than you. And and in those days, it literally was. I remember when I had my first boy, Jackson, who sadly we lost. But when he was born, my mum were going, "You only pick that child up for 20 minutes on a night or you'll spoil him." And she wanted me to put my son out all day in all weathers, bring him in, feed him, put him back out in the garden, leave him to scream. What?
Fresh air.
Yeah, fresh air. And it was more like you were fed, you were clothed, possibly. You were fed, you were clothed, you were picked up, and that was the end of it. And then you went to bed at 7 o'clock. Yeah. And I think that generation has got it's created an awful lot of problems for our generation. And it is, you're right, it's how you make sense of what happened to you. How you make sense of your relationships with your parents, family, neighbours, whatever. And then, because you're going to decide how that manifests in you. So my son, there ain't a day goes by where, I overlove him. I'm like, he's 30 and he's going, oh, stop it. But that's a really interesting thing. How much of us is real? And, read the book, folks. But how much of us is real and how much of us is a construct of behaviour that has gone before? That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And what you take from it. And you're right. You just it's really hard, isn't it? Because like to lose a child is like the biggest loss in the world, isn't it? It's not the natural order. It's not what you do. So even for you, I imagine where the hell you start to move from there. I mean, you look at people, you think you've got a hard life. That to me is the worst thing in the world. I'd been a ward eating flumps because I couldn't. I don't even think I would cope.
No,
You know.
it's interesting. And that's why I asked you when we first started talking, do you see people, when people are leaving the planet, do you feel, and you wouldn't personally see them, do you see people talking to the relatives that collect them? Because obviously I'm interested in that. I mean, this isn't about me, but I knew my son were going to die the second I saw him. And when they put him in my arms, I just said, what do you do when babies die? And nurse said, he's beautiful. What are you asking that for? His health there. And it goes, what do you do when babies die? And she wrote to me and said, you knew. And I always had that dread. I had a premonition the night before. Lots of things happened on that day that told me, because in my head, it had already happened from the minute that I saw him. So whether that makes it easier or not, but I guess we're both talking about the same thing. It's the multi-dimension of life, the complexity and yet the simpleness of life, and what drives you. I can't stand any kind of injustice, child abuse. Literally, I've pulled people off the kids in town and just gone berserk, because that's how it affects you. Do you choose the way that you've clearly chosen the way that your life has affected you, which has made you this, for me, sat here listening to you for the last 50 minutes, this amazing, strong woman who gives a life to so many people who otherwise wouldn't have had what they've got.
You think that, don't you? But it is absolutely a God-given gift. I don't know how many people who go to work who say they love going to work. I love going to work. I love going to work. And I am so lucky. I have so many people around me. I'm so lucky. And to be the bit that makes the difference for the last part of somebody's life it's just unenviable. Is it? What do you do? Who else gets that? To help people through that. And you've got to try. It's a really, really scary process for people to die, and you've got to make it better for people. You've got to make it better for families, and you've got to make it better for people. And you see so many people who are not at all scared to die, not at all, and they're ready, and they'll tell you they're ready, and they'll say it's me time, but the families are scared, and they say, what are you saying that for? You're not going anywhere. But they've come to a place where they're all right, but trying to make your family all right with that, it's like, oh God, you're not, and I've seen so many things when I'd only been qualified and I was on a placement. I think I was in A&E, and a little girl had died, and I think she was about 4. I think she'd had some kind of accident and she died, and I was just sent to do jobs like you are when you do your training and things, and her mum came in with a quilt, and she said, will you just put this quilt on it? And I was looking at the nurse and I was thinking, oh, I was nearly crying, and she said she gets really cold, she just wants her quilt, she'll need a quilt. And the sister was saying, she's all right, but you can come back and see her. And the nurse was saying, just take the quilt, and I was thinking, why isn't she just taking this quilt? Why isn't she wants her to be warm. I can see totally why she wants her wrapped up. She's trying to care for her, and she died, she's trying to cope. And then later on, it was a couple of months later when I spoke to the matron who was on the ward, and I said, why didn't you just give her the quilt? And she said, because you have to deal with it from there on, Jenny. From that point on, you have to deal with it. So it's the way up, isn't it? There wasn't a right answer in that. Do you give her the quilt and let her feel better because she's given her the quilt? Or do you not take the quilt and say you need to go home with your husband and your daughter's passed away and this is a process and this is what's going to happen? There wasn't a right answer, was there? But for me,
give her the quilt. Give that woman the quilt. I remember when I had to identify my son's body, somebody had put a plastic rose on him. And I remember going absolutely berserk at that plastic rose. And because that wasn't the way that I identified with things. And yeah, give the woman the quilt, give that woman whatever she wanted, I would say. I'm going to ask you another question.
Yeah.
Is it really a phenomenon? Because this did happen with my father. My father, on the Sunday night, I went in to see him, and he said, "Nico, I'm going to go on Thursday." And I said, "No, you're not going to go on Thursday. We've remodified the house for the wheelchair. He had cancer in his spine and blah, blah." And I goes, "No, you're coming." He goes, "No, Nico, I'm leaving on Thursday." And 2 minutes to midnight on Thursday night, he passed away. Is that a phenomenon? And if it is, how do you make sense of all this?
I think
what do you think it's all about? Is there a God? Were you meant to meet your children, to have the life you've had? Did you always know?
Did you think? Yeah, I do think that. And is there a God, wherever you call him? Well, I think there's probably a God in 100 different names. We all talk to the same somebody. I just think he's 100 different names for him. Hopefully not to offend anyone, but that's how I feel. Yeah, and yeah, sometimes I've thought, did things happen in my life that made, because they were meant to, because I was meant to get my kids, because I was meant to become a nurse, or because, I don't know, maybe, and there might be times when I haven't been a very good nurse, but have all these things meant to make a difference? Are you there for a bigger purpose, for something else? And death isn't, everybody's scared of dying, don't get me wrong. If someone told me tomorrow I was dying, I would be as terrified as everybody else, but in a probably different level, because people really aren't scared to die. And yes, people know quite often when they're going to die. People tend, when you nurse, a lot of people who are at peace with themselves die better. I've seen people die badly who weren't at peace with themselves, who haven't maybe been very nice people. Because I always say to everybody, and I've always said it to all my kids, at the end of the day, we all have to meet our maker. You've got to face your own demons. You have to, whether you like it or not. So try and be nice. If you do anything at all, just try and be nice, because we all have it to come to, all of us. And if I remember a consult, I wrote in, I think, one of my books, I can't remember which one now, but I remember being on the ward round, and there was a consultant, and he used to have his dicky bow on his waistcoat and stuff, and there was a little lady then, she'd gone in, and he was so lovely, and he kneeled down in front of her, and he was saying, "We can't cure you. You are going to pass away." And she went, I know, thank you, doctor." And I was thinking, how mad is it that they thank him for what, like, he sort of just said, and he like patted her hand, and he said, "Are you all right yourself?" She said, "I'm all right." She said, "My brother's here, and my uncle." And he went, "Well, that's good, that's good." But he wasn't fazed by it, and he'd been a consultant for God knows how many years.
Uncle and brother there in spirit or in real life?
No, in spirit.
In spirit, yeah.
But my little brothers are there, and you're like, oh God. And then he turned to the juniors that were there, and they're all like really keen to know what to do on this ward round, and they're all learning, and the trolley's there, and he said, "Right, gentlemen, so why do you believe that this lady can see family?" And they were looking, and they were all looking through the notes, and he went, "You won't find it in the trolley." And then it was a Chinese doctor, and he said that he went, I think it is because of delirium when you die and you release chemicals." And he went, "Yes, that's it." And I remember feeling like so disappointed. I thought, oh God, is it just about chemicals? Is that it? And then I thought, well, you know what, if that what makes her better, if that makes her feel better, then at least like that's something. And then as I walked away, he came back down the consult, and he said, "So you tell me, Cher, why don't we see cars and houses?" He said, "Why do we only see people who are passed?" And then he walked on. And I thought, yeah, you're right, because people don't see other stuff. People do only see people who are passed. My daughter's here, my dog's here, and it's common, and probably every nurse will tell you, or the majority of nurses will tell you. It's really common.
Well, that's because it's real for me, and I get the set, yeah, and for you as well. Yeah, it's so, what an incredible, do you know, you're so bloody humble. Can I just say, people might be a bit confused, because sometimes I've called you Cher, sometimes I've called you Jenny, you've called yourself Jenny. Can I just tell everybody, Cher Graiden is the pen name, Jenny is the other name. Just for clarity, but we're going to put a link up to your books because you're so humble and yet you've brought so much to the world in your last 50 years. I could talk to you all day. When this shit is over, I really hope I can come up there and we can have a little talk together, or a coffee. I love coffee shops too. And do you know what? You're bloody marvellous and I'm buying. I can't wait to meet you. You are an amazing woman. So, is there any last message or anything you'd like to go before we wrap up? You'd like to say before we wrap up?
Just don't be hard on yourself, everybody. Don't be hard on yourself. Life's hard enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Drink tea, eat biscuits, enjoy the little things. And it'll come right. It'll all come right. Everything will come right, has its own way. Life has its own way of working things out. Always.
That's a great place to end. Thank you with all of my heart. I can't wait to meet you. God bless you. Take care. See you later. Brilliant. Well, that's it for another week. Hope you took something from that. Do you know what the thing is? If you just take one sentence that actually you learn something from or that makes you feel better, it's worth watching. If you liked it, subscribe down here. Even if you didn't like it, subscribe down here. And I'll see you next week. Take care until then. And again, thank you.